responsible positions are voting on this issue believing that marijuana is the same substance that they might have tried in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and the start of the 90s. If they did not try it, they knew someone who did and did not see the unintended consequences. But let us look at the plant itself. Marijuana is a plant that for centuries was unaltered. It grew in the wild. When the crude plant started to become popular in the 1960s, it was still considered wild. The plant was comprised of about 50% THC, the psychoactive ingredient, and 50% cannabinoids. The THC concentration was anywhere from 1 to 3%. With the popularization of the Canadian grow methods and the passage of the state initiative, the crude plant changed dramatically. No longer was the plant wild, but was grown in controlled environments. The crude plant was altered genetically, and a majority of the cannabinoids were eliminated. The plant today averages between 18 to 24% THC content. There have been plants that have been found to have THC concentrations in the low 30s. But the scientific research that is being conducted on the plant throughout the world is showing that the cannabinoids are the beneficial part of the plant, the part of the plant that has been bred out in terms of the current growing processes. The crude plant is now nothing more than a THC breeding machine. The advocates of this issue have once again selected a very well-crafted message to the public. In essence, they are saying that if the state of California should legalize and tax the marijuana, that this action would allow the state to remain solvent. The argument would then be that with a solvent state, police officers, firefighters, and teachers would not be laid off. The Board of Equalization states that there would be a possible $1.4 billion in new tax revenues available. I have concerns about the legitimacy of their assertions and the underlying facts used as its basis. In May of 2009, the National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse at Columbia University released a report entitled Shoveling Up Part 2, The Impact of Substance Abuse on Federal, State, and Local Budgets. This 176-page report documents for the first time the cost of the two legal substances that are abused today, alcohol and tobacco. The costs are substantial. In 2005, the state of California spent $19.9 billion on substance abuse and addiction, or $545 per capita, based on a population of 36.5 million. Once again, I'm talking specifically about alcohol and tobacco. But the state of California collected $1.4 billion of tax revenue, or $38.69 per capita, on the sale of alcohol and tobacco products. Yes, the cost far exceeded the revenues. On June 19th of this year, California's Carcinogen Identification Committee of the Office of Environmental Health and Assessment Science Advisory Board issued a ruling that listed marijuana smoke as a carcinogenic. If we are to examine this issue in the vacuum of monetary impact alone, why would we, residents of California, want to legalize a crude substance that is known to cause cancer when the cost of substance abuse of the psychoactive drug will far outweigh...
Chief, excuse me, with all due respect, I want to be even-handed here because we did correct another speaker. At this hearing, we're not going to discuss the health benefits or detriments. We're going to hold that over for our health committee, and I'm sorry if you didn't understand that, and I just wanted to point that out to you since I already pointed it out to someone else. But thank you for your accommodation.
I can go on?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. A crime we are seeing an increase is drug driving. Even without marijuana legalization, this is a serious problem. A 2004 study of emergency room admissions for motor vehicle crashes revealed that more than half of the drivers admitted to a level 1 trauma center tested positive for drugs other than alcohol. This study, published in the Traffic Injury Review, was similar to numerous other studies. Significantly, when breakouts were done of the drugs that resulted in the driving under the influence accident and or arrest, the overwhelming majority of test samples showed marijuana in the blood system of the arrestee. Legalization of marijuana will only result in an increased use of marijuana, with a corresponding increase in drug driving arrest. Unlike many countries in Western Europe and over 12 states in the United States who provide that the presence of any level of illegal drug in a person's system is a driving violation, California has no statutory system in place to deter drug driving. In fact, I brought forward a bill that was sponsored by then Assemblyperson Benoit to address this serious issue, and this committee rejected the legislation in 2008. Drug driving is a serious growing problem, and marijuana is a major element of drug driving. Law enforcement has no real tools to combat drug driving, and surely no one in this room could seriously suggest that legalization of marijuana will help with this problem. You are entrusted to make policy decisions that are in the best interests of all Californians, not just special interests and or advocacy groups. This is a serious issue, and a couple hours of testimony will not afford anyone the ability to present research, scientific evidence that would shed enormous light on this psychoactive drug. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We do appreciate your presence here. And just a small correction, as author of this legislation, have mentioned that the taxation could be a benefit in terms of income for the state, but in no way did I ever state that this would solve our budget problem. If only. If only. But thank you. Ms. Fairchild?
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chairman of the Public Safety Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the important issue regarding legalization of marijuana and the effective drug policy. I'm here representing the California Narcotic Officers Association and our 7,000 voting members, and the National Narcotic Officers Association Coalition, which represents 33 state narcotic associations and more than 50,000 police officers across the country. And more importantly, I'm here as a concerned member of our community. Although I'm not an expert on medicine or drug policy, I am a veteran narcotic agent with more than 28 years of service in California. But before I get to the issue at hand, I respectfully request to donate a few moments of our time to silent remembrance of the 3 DEA agents who lost their lives in Afghanistan this Monday in deterring illegal drugs from reaching our streets. Thank you. I'll get straight to the issue. What is the goal of effective drug policy, and what can be anticipated results of legalization, and are they consistent with effective drug policy? And what does effective drug policy look like? Effective drug policy is a policy that protects. It protects our children from exposure to drug abuse. It protects our educational future from increased dropout rates. And it protects our economy from employee absenteeism and injury. And it maintains or heightens the quality of life of our communities. In short, it provides public safety. And that's why the idea of legalizing marijuana is bad public policy. If legalized, the cost of marijuana will no doubt decrease. Now take a powerful substance, one that not only operates on but modifies the human brain by producing compelling effects, and ask how many more people will use it if it's very cheap, legal, and glamorized in the media. The answer is a lot. And what will this a lot bring us? Will it bring us lower violent crime? Maybe, if the crime committed by users seeking money to buy drugs and the dealers protecting their rights to sell drugs fall by amount greater than the increase in crime committed by dependent users who are no longer capable of holding a job. Now, not all recreational drug users are incapacitated, but a significant number are. According to SAMHSA, we have 14.6 million marijuana users now, with 4.2 million of them dependent on marijuana. What will that number increase to? And it will increase if marijuana is legalized. Remember that drug dependence is a chronic disability. After we create the drug-dependent population, we can't turn the clock back. And I know what you think about violent crime. We picture it at robberies, guns, knives. But I tell you what, when a recreational drug user backs over your 4-year-old, or some grief-stricken parent loses their teenager in a marijuana-related traffic fatality, they consider themselves victims of violent crime. SAMHSA reported that ER episodes involving marijuana tripled from 40,000 in 1994 to 120,000 in 2002, and now surpasses ER admissions involving heroin. From our partners at the federal level, ONDCP drug czar Gil Kurlikowski has clearly stated that marijuana legalization for any purpose remains a non-starter in the Obama administration, and it isn't even on the agenda. Attorney General Holder guidelines did not open the door to legalization. Legalization is being sold as being a cure to ending violence in Mexico, as a cure to state budget problems, and as a cure to health problems. The American public should be skeptical. Driving accidents in America involved marijuana killed more than 8,000 and maimed 500,000 every year. In July 26 of this year, Diane Schuler slaughtered 5 family members and 3 others while driving drunk and high on marijuana. The legalization of marijuana would undoubtedly increase these death and injury totals. With the loss of law enforcement funds, you would have fewer officers in proactive enforcement and more resources required for crime scene investigations of impaired drivers' death and injury sites. Once again, diverting proactive crime prevention that saves lives to response calls that simply documents the details of an ended or injured life. The legalization of marijuana is bad public policy.
Thank you for reminding us, too, of our losses. Okay, Ms. Pakula?
Thank you very much for having me here. I am Rosalie Ricardo Pakula. I am a senior economist and co-director of Rand's Drug Policy Research Center. I've also been conducting research on marijuana policy, specifically in its relationship with alcohol, for over the past 15 years. And I've written a book peer-reviewed by the scientific community and published by Cambridge University Press on cannabis use, public health, and public policy. So I am coming here as a scientist well familiar with the literature. I am not here to either endorse or oppose the consideration of legalization, but merely to appeal to you to consider more information. Right now, the information to make this decision, as reflected in the revenue estimates or numbers that are being heard, are insufficient on which to base any sort of sound policy if interested in doing a cost-benefit calculation. There's a number of reasons why. I'm going to highlight 4 in particular based on my review of the OEE's estimate of revenues. First and foremost, I think it's very important to understand that prohibition, with whatever its costs, is extremely effective at keeping the price of marijuana very, very high. If you look at estimates for low-grade marijuana reported not just by police, but by people who get arrested and reported in household surveys, the cost for low-grade marijuana is between $300 and $350 per pound. We did an estimate of the back of the envelope calculation of what it would cost to produce low grade in your own backyard, not using high technology, and the cost was $75 per pound. That's 400% increase that the black market does for 2 reasons. One, because of the increased risks and sanctions, but also because it creates imperfect information in the market. And imperfect information reduces competition and keeps prices artificially high. That's important because you right now have estimates of what would happen to the price in a legalized market, and the assumption in the revenue estimate was a 50% decline. That if you compare the cost of production to the cost of an illegal market, the difference is substantially higher. Why is that important? If you allow the price to drop and tax it at an amount as proposed in the original legislation of $50 an ounce, or some other amount to try to get the price back up to the artificially high number, you keep the incentive, the economic profit incentive for the black market to remain. We have done studies looking at cigarettes, looking at the experiment that Canada did raising its taxes in the early 1990s, and a simple $2 difference in the price per pack of cigarettes between Canada and the U.S. created such enormous smuggling that Canada repealed its higher tax on tobacco. We're not talking about big price differences here. That was a simple $2 difference. So unless you legalize and let the price of marijuana fall close to its production cost with just a small tax, you will not get rid of the black market, and you now as a state will be forced to incur the cost of regulating the substance as well as fighting a black market. You'll have the dual problem. In addition, if price is allowed to drop, revenues obviously will go down. If the tax is not $50 an ounce, revenues will go down substantially if you estimate a tax that's more likely to be operated and get rid of the black market. If price is allowed to fall that much, the scientific community concurs 100%. Demand will rise. What we don't know is how much. You cannot use what we have in the published scientific literature, which calculates very small changes in prices on consumption, and infer from that what would happen with a 80% reduction in the price of marijuana. Economic modeling does not allow you to compare those two. It's outside of our models. Consumption will go up We don't know how much, but we could put in plausible estimates, and the range needs to be considered because it has important implications regarding expenditure and revenue from that decision. With use, harms will also go up, as was already mentioned. We know right now today that the number of people in treatment for marijuana as the primary drug of abuse that were not criminally justice referred is over 160,000. Those are costs that the state does incur. Again, I recognize it's a public health cost, but it's a revenue. If you're looking from a tax revenue perspective and spending, and this is about that calculation, you need to consider those costs as part of the overall picture. Finally, as I mentioned before, for these and a variety of reasons, we believe that the estimates of the tax revenue that have been calculated thus far, and was stated by the LAO, there's lots of assumptions here. RAND, in our work that we've done for the European Commission, for the Office of National Drug Control Policy, as well as for Australia, we consistently report ranges for these things so that the level of uncertainty can be seen. And in the case of California, if you use our methodology, the range in estimates for revenue or not revenue, but in terms of the size of the market, ranges from 6.2 million ounces to 28.8 million ounces. That's a four-fold difference that has tremendous implications in terms of what could be incurred from a revenue perspective. So we ask that you consider these uncertainties when doing these calculations so that the calculation can be done with the science kept in mind.
Thank you, Ms. Bakula, for your expertise. And Mr. Geringer?
Yes, Dale Geringer for California NORML, the National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws. On behalf of California's millions of marijuana users who are tired of being created criminals and really would like to be law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. I just want to say that although marijuana has supposedly been decriminalized in California, possession does remain, of course, a criminal misdemeanor. But more importantly, the act of obtaining marijuana involves a necessary felony, either cultivation or distribution or sale. And so you have literally millions of felonies being generated by these laws. We think it makes no sense for taxpayers to be paying to criminalize marijuana users and their suppliers when we could be raising revenues on a legal market. Now, to address something that came up earlier, the question about whether California can, in fact, tax something that might be illegal under federal law, I would point out that we are currently collecting sales taxes from all the medical cannabis clubs. It's to the tune of tens of millions of dollars at the moment, and my home city of Oakland just enacted by an 80% vote a tax on cannabis businesses. So taxes can be collected and are being collected already on something that's not legal. I won't go into the long list of official studies and commissions that have concluded that our marijuana laws are too strict and that the costs of enforcement outweigh whatever negligible benefits they have. I won't go into the issue about DUI studies either, which also show cannabis has a really negligible impact on overall safety on the road. I would like to remind the committee of the failure of California's own marijuana laws when it comes to actually controlling use. That chart up there on the left of marijuana arrests shows from 1960, which is on the left, to 1975, that high point there, marijuana was a felony in California. That didn't prevent an explosion of marijuana use. Which the legislature found was so expensive that they decriminalized. And we saw an immediate reduction in law enforcement costs as a result of that. And contrary to the prediction of opponents, it did not lead to California, quote, going to pot or any perceptible, actually, change in marijuana use in California. And there's a lot of studies that show no impact of tough marijuana enforcement on actual usage. I do want to go to the examples of places where marijuana is legal, one being the Netherlands, which has come up before, and there was a lot of misinformation stated about the Netherlands previously. I was just there. It's really compares quite favorably to other neighboring nations in Europe. I have the figures here on the level of marijuana use in the Netherlands is actually in a middling range for European countries. It's 3.3%. That's half the rate here in the United States. The UN the World Health Organization did a report on all of this, and they concluded that the U.S., which has been driving much of the world's drug research and drug policy agenda, stands out for higher levels of use of alcohol, cocaine, and cannabis. Despite punitive illegal drug policies, the Netherlands, with a less criminally punitive approach to cannabis, has experienced lower levels of use, particularly among younger adults. Clearly, a punitive policy towards possession and use accounts for little variation in rates of illegal drug use. I would point out that the Netherlands is raising an estimated 400 million euros, that's $600 million from their coffee houses right now. They're about half the size of California, so if you double that, I think you come back to the $1 billion that we were talking about before. Finally, I'd like to make a mention about one other example of legal cannabis that's worked. The shortcoming with the Netherlands is they haven't gotten around to establishing a regulated production system yet. The people are talking about it, they haven't done it yet. But we do have an example of such a system in India. Up until 1986, cannabis was legal in many states of India, and cannabis was licensed by the state, the producers were licensed, the sellers were licensed, and there was a tax. And this system was exhaustively studied by the British. And they concluded that this system really worked and was better than any policy of prohibition that was being suggested. And the British concluded that the best policy for regulating hemp drugs is a combination of a fixed duty with license fees. And we recommend that California do likewise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just one housekeeping thing. Apparently this room is to be used about 1 o'clock by the senior legislature, and they're kind of adamant about that. So we'll keep that in mind. Judge Gray.
Well, thank you. I guess I am the final presenter list formally on here, and I want to commend you, first of all, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Hagman, for inquiring in this. I want to commend you for your leadership in bringing up this really important topic. And I'm also going to commend you for staying within schedule. That's an amazing accomplishment in itself. I would, now that I guess I am the last presenter, like to comment quickly about a few other things that have been discussed, and then I would like to talk to you about children. But that issue really has not been addressed particularly, except maybe by Reverend Richardson. The first is that if this state of California were to in fact make this marijuana no longer illegal for adults, that is not at all the same thing as condoning it. We don't condone the smoking of cigarettes or the using of alcohol, etc. So to put that label on it, I think, is inappropriate. Number two, as I have an understanding that today, as we speak here in Sacramento, that there are thousands of people in prisons in the state of California today for doing nothing but smoking marijuana. Thousands in prison for doing nothing but smoking marijuana. Why? Because they're on parole for one reason or another. And once they get off parole for whatever that offense was, if they smoke marijuana, it's a violation of parole, and they're immediately put back into state prison with all of the benefits that they had accrued, getting jobs, etc., supporting their families, being lost. Another one is that the tougher we get with regard to marijuana prosecution, literally, from my experience as a judge, and I have seen this in Orange County forever, the softer we get with the prosecution of everything else. And that is something that we simply have so many resources, and if we're spending them in prosecutions of marijuana, we are not spending them for prosecutions of rape, homicide, etc. Then, marijuana will never put this violence that we heard earlier out of business. All of these statistics that you heard earlier about the violence and the killings of both the police officers and everyone else is occurring under today's system of marijuana prohibition, etc. The only way you put these Mexican cartels out of business and these other violent creatures out of business is to undercut the price, to make it no longer illegal so that you don't have that enormous profit motive to get these people involved with that violence, etc. The only way you do it is to undercut the price, and Assembly Bill 390 is a really good place to start. Otherwise, there are marijuana today that is stronger in our society without a doubt. But the reason why it's out there and stronger is because of marijuana prohibition. that there are lots of people that would much prefer, like you said, not to use the stronger stuff, but the cardinal rule of prohibition is always push the stronger stuff. So if I'm a bootlegger and I run into the same criminal justice problems for selling a barrel of beer as a barrel of bourbon, guess which one I'm going to push? The bourbon, because I make more money. It's the same thing with marijuana. Nothing is going to be legalized in this state. It is a program of the strictly regulated distribution. It wouldn't be legalized. It's a strictly regulated distribution, just like alcohol and cigarettes. We hopefully will not advertise them. Please put into your legislation not to allow this to be advertised. We want to de-glamorize it, not glamorize it. So no advertising, and hold people accountable for their actions. I know I'm going on, but I'd like to talk about children for a couple of minutes, because today our marijuana laws are putting our children in harm's way. We are continuing with this failed program for all of its defects, so-called, because we want to reduce the exposure of a lifestyle of marijuana usage and marijuana selling to our children, and it's doing the opposite. Today, it is easier for our young people to get marijuana than it is alcohol. And if you don't want to listen to me, ask any teenagers you can find. They will tell you that because of alcohol prohibition, marijuana prohibition. And Reverend Richardson kind of stole one of my lines, because it's true, because the illegal dealers do not ask for ID. So let's make it less available for children by regulating and controlling it. Number two, adult drug dealers will recruit children to sell drugs. They will recruit them into their own drug distribution system. For $50 in cash, you can buy all of the 15, 16-year-olds in the inner city or anywhere else that you want to. It's chump change for the adult drug dealer. It's lots of money for a kid. So you use them as gophers and lookouts and couriers, and as soon as their reliability is established, then they're trusted to sell small amounts of drugs out in the communities. And who do they sell to if they're out there doing it? I assure you, no one in this room. They're going to sell to their 14, 15, 16-year-old peers. That is despicable, and it's caused by drug prohibition. So I say, let's reverse that, let's turn it around, let's regulate it, let's control it, because this prohibition is not working. I believe it fervently. I'm so concerned about our children. I'm so concerned about these illegal marijuana out there with all of its ramifications. I want to reduce those harms by passing your legislation, and I commend you again for these hearings.
Thank you very much. Are we ready for public comment? Okay. Thanks again to all of you. And we're going to start the public comment part of the hearing. There's quite a few people. And as I mentioned, the room has to be used in about 20 minutes or so. So I'm going to give everybody 30 seconds. And can we use your microphone, Sue? Oh, great. Okay. And we're going to time you. Is this for me? Oh, good. Okay, can we see the first? Don't be shy.
This wall here.
All right, listen to the sergeant.
All right, my name is Brian Brackney.
Okay.
My name is Brian Brackney. I support legalization. We have to encourage laws that no longer have public respect. Should be done away with. I'm glad that the Protestant churches, including the liberal churches such as the Unitarians, have learned the lesson from prohibition and are now on the right side of the issue. I have been in Mexico, and I know that it is the conditions of poverty and misery there that created, and
Next speaker.
the money could be better spent fighting it. You put Peace Corps.
Okay, thank you. We don't want to use up the time of our other colleagues. All right, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Corey Jackson. I'm with the Zero Tolerance for Underage Drinking Foundation, where we tour schools to make it cool not to drink underage. We're not for or against it. Well, we're being preemptive in the sense of that when one part of society gets something, another part of society loses. That part of society is youth. All we're asking is that you decide that as alcohol and everything else, we realize the social implications, that we ask that monies be earmarked for preventive maintenance, because that's what's going to happen. And we know that's going to happen, so we ask
Thank
for
you,
that.
sir.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Vicki Renee Elizabeth Manning. I'm here today because I'm against the initiative to the legislation on the legalization of marijuana, and I feel that it is a crime. I feel that marijuana is both illegal and it's very harmful. Through studies, research, and statistics, it has been proven that the use of marijuana is harmful to both the body metabolism as well as the brain development. Today here in Sacramento, there are several organizations and corporations that work towards drug rehabilitation, which proves that marijuana use, along with...
Thank you, ma'am, very much.
Only have some... Oh.
I'm so sorry. Next speaker.
Thanks again, Chair of the Public Safety Committee and Vice Chair, for having this important hearing. I represent the Patient ID Center. My name is Jeff Jones. I'm also a co-proponent for the Tax and Regulate measure next year that's going to be on the November ballot, taxcannabis2010.org. We have collected by this weekend nearly half of the signatures we need to qualify for the ballot next year. And we say that your acting today is only showing that the signatures and the people that are out there asking this question are being followed by the leaders. Next year, if you're not ahead of this, we will be, and you'll have to react about what the voters are going to say. Like with Prop 215, the voters decided.
Next speaker, please. Thank you.
Thank you for having the public comment. My name is DJ Peterson. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit to help prevent and reduce drug abuse among youth. We're in a neighboring county, El Dorado County. We already have 1 out of every 4 11th graders smoking marijuana in the last 30 days. We don't want to increase that. The testimony earlier said that with the lower prices, the consumption will increase by 40%. We're afraid that that's going to get in the hands of our young people. But if it does pass, we want to make sure that there's no glamorization of marijuana use. We want no advertising on television. We fought against the tobacco companies.
Thank you, sir.
And we don't want them running the show with Acapulco Gold and other things they may have trademarked.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Robert Ellsberg, and as you know, the feds don't allow marijuana. It's illegal. In California, you have a state agency that tells you it's loaded with carcinogenic chemicals. You ought to look at the Drug Dealers Liability Act. If you're going to put a tax stamp of approval on all the marijuana in this state, you might be liable as a state for the liability that's caused by the medical damage of people. So you really should look at that, because you might not be as profitable when you start seeing people get medically ill behind it.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Hello, my name is John Lovell. Look, we have enormous social and public safety problems right now caused by legal alcohol, pharmaceuticals. Tobacco kills people. Given that backdrop, why on earth do we want to add yet another mind-altering substance to the array of substances that compromise people's 5 senses? And oh, by the way, dare I say it in this committee, that substance is carcinogenic. This is not positive public policy, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Lovell. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Robert Kerr. I'm just a dad and a grandpa, and I used marijuana when I was young. When my oldest son was 6 years old, I used it. He now has a medical marijuana card and is growing pot, supposedly because of a hurt hip. I've lived that lifestyle. I've been there and done that. And all this stuff going on here don't really matter about how much more available it's going to be and how much cheaper it's going to be for our kids to get a hold of.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Yes, I'm Reverend James Butler from the Alcohol Narcotic Education Foundation. Appreciate the hearing. I have brought some material that's been provided. It's just a sample of the material available from the California Office or Department of Alcohol and Drug Problems. I believe legalizing or decriminalizing marijuana would be a bad idea. It actually is something that we cannot afford. Regardless of what revenues you might receive, the cost to deal with it will be higher. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. Margaret Dooley-Samueli with the Drug Policy Alliance. I'd like to thank this committee for having such a robust conversation about such an important issue. Marijuana is here to stay. It has been here a long time, and it is very commonly used. The question is, what is the best public policy to use to respond to it? Criminalization has failed. We push people into the criminal justice system. Meanwhile, we lack resources for drug prevention, intervention, and treatment. That's what we need to focus on.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Gretchen Burns-Bergman, and I'm the Executive Director of A New Path, Parents for Addiction Treatment and Healing. We work to reduce the stigma associated with addictive illness. I have 2 sons who both have addictive illness. One son who spent 11 years of his life recycling through the prison system because of possession of marijuana. Despite all this, I absolutely believe that it's time to end marijuana prohibition, to legalize, to tax and regulate. Our children are at the forefront of the war on drugs, and it's only getting worse. We're losing lives every day.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
My name is Paul Armentano. I'm Deputy Director of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. I'm also the co-author of the book Marijuana is Safer, So Why Are We Driving People to Drink, which I'd like to leave with this committee. I will be very brief. All of the adverse consequences and unintended adverse consequences that were talked about today by law enforcement and others are taking place under a policy of prohibition. They are not taking place under a policy of regulation. If we want to impose proper controls over the production, the quality of marijuana, and who uses marijuana and where, then we need a policy of regulation. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Aaron Smith with the Marijuana Policy Project. I just want to say I think nobody in this room condones some of the violent consequences that have come out of the policy of prohibition that Ms. Fairchild spoke about earlier. We've learned this. This is alcohol prohibition all over again. Let's learn our lesson that we learned 75 years ago when we repealed prohibition and apply that to the current failures of our marijuana policy.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hi, Mickey Norris, Cannabis Consumers Campaign and West Coast Leaf. I'd like to enter into the record that marijuana prohibition, and I have a handout here, is discriminatory against cannabis consumers. It violates our rights to equal protections before the law. It gives preferential treatment to people who use alcohol, and I believe that's wrong, and I believe we deserve our equal rights too. And also, I was consultant on various lowest law enforcement priority initiatives in California. The cities of Santa Monica, Santa Cruz, Santa Barbara, and Oakland all are in favor of this.
Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Gottlieb with the Drug Policy Alliance. I just want to quickly amplify some of the arrest stats. We did not have a chance to really hear about the racist implications of marijuana arrest records. African Americans are profoundly discriminated against in marijuana enforcement in this state, representing fewer than 7% of the population, yet 22% of all marijuana offenses and 33% of all marijuana felony arrests. We arrest more African Americans for marijuana felonies than we do white people, who are 6 times more plentiful in the population.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Perry. I'm a representative of Students for Sensible Drug Policy. Before moving out to California, I worked as a substance abuse counselor for one of the largest treatment providers in the country, and I support this initiative because all of the young people that I worked with told me that it was easier to buy marijuana than it was to buy alcohol or tobacco. And our Monitoring the Future study has proved this. We have more 10th graders using tobacco than are using marijuana, and tobacco is a much more addictive and much more available drug.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
My name is Rishi Malhotra. I'm from UC Berkeley, Students with Sensible Drug Policy. I just want to point out all the negative effects of a misdemeanor arrest that can occur even if one is not put in jail. You can be denied federal financial aid, you can be denied food stamps, you can be denied public housing, and you can be denied the ability to adopt a child, all for the simple possession of marijuana. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Craig Negretti, and I'm speaking from you on behalf of San Jose State University students. The California State University lost $584 million this previous year. I'd like to ask, why is California's students' education being compromised here? We are the DARE generation. These drug educational policies have failed us. With the AB 390 bill, there's an education clause in that we need accurate, scientific, and most importantly, truthful information about marijuana and how it affects students and American society. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Matt Kintz. I'm a student at UC Berkeley and member of Students for Sensible Drug Policy. I wrote a big speech, but I can basically just boil it down to every dollar you spend on marijuana prohibition is a dollar you could spend on education. Our schools are bad and they're getting worse, so please do something.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Alexander Woon, and I'm a student at San Jose State University on behalf of Students for Sensible Drug Policy. Many people use marijuana for relaxation and stress relief purposes. But instead, a lot of people are in fear of using marijuana because of legal complications and employment drug testing. Instead, they use alcohol and tobacco, and their drive to use these substances, which have been proven to kill millions of people across the world. We should give a safer alternative to people to have a safer alternative. Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Redmond. I just came back from Mexico City a month ago where we had a World Congress on drug addiction, and over 4,000 people came to look at drug policy and sign a declaration saying that legalization of marijuana is bad public policy. And these are treatment providers from all over the world that have seen the problems of drug addiction, especially in youth, with over 60% of kids in treatment citing marijuana as their primary drug of addiction. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
My name is Tanisha Allen, and I'm the youth representative for CADFI and the International Faith-Based Coalition. On behalf of the youth, I would like to voice that I think that legalizing marijuana would be one of the worst decisions in public policy that we make, as it is another burden that we have to carry through our generation and another burden that our children will have to carry on top of alcohol, on top of the war that's already continuing, and on top of other social and economical issues that we already have. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Michelle Aldridge. I've worked on marijuana legalization for 37 years. The marijuana laws were put into existence by laws that covered up by racial profiling that were prevalent at the time. Lies about the plant, lies about the effects, lies about the violence. It's time to stop waging war on the citizens of California. It's time to stop the lies. It's time to put the monies from jailing marijuana attendees into schools. Stop wasting tax dollars. We need to reinvest in California schools. Teach people to read, write, and do arithmetic.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Michael Aldrich from San Francisco. I want to add something that hasn't been said. The best way to legalize marijuana in California must include a regulatory scheme that allows small local cultivators and farmers, small businesses, small family enterprises, and does not just merely encourage tax revenues by big corporations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Bishop Dr. Ron Allen. I represent the International Faith-Based Coalition, the CEO and President. We are a collaboration of all religions, including Protestant and Catholic. We can completely understand the ramification of any drug being legalized. I'm from Oak Park resident, and we can absolutely see the effect of any drug that is legalized in our community and in our churches. And so I represent 3,600 churches, and we are saying absolutely no to the legalization of drugs. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Next speaker, please.
My name is Mr. Payne. I'm a community activist in the Del Paso Heights area. I coached at Martin Luther King Junior High School and high school for years. I don't really think you want to do this. I personally firsthand saw the effects, how marijuana affected my kids that was running track, playing basketball. I'm in the inner city. I would invite the governor and you and all those that want to legalize marijuana to come into my community. Also, I'm from Chicago, to the inner city community, and see what damage it's doing to the people that society calls most likely or most likely to achieve. It has a devastating effect, and I really wish you would rethink what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Pastor Gerald Johnson, and I pastor in San Diego County. Legalizing marijuana would continue to burden our young people. We, as the adults, we, as the people who make the decisions, we should look at the ramifications of what's going to happen afterwards. We should not use marijuana taxation as an opportunity to balance the budget. We have to look at trafficking, we have to look at treatment, and we have to look at prevention.
Thank you, Pastor. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Abraham Nisley. I actually work for the Tax Cannabis 2010 campaign, but I want to speak to you today as a citizen and as a medical cannabis patient. I have Crohn's disease. I've had surgery within the last year that's given me a choice right now with a $264,000 medical bill where I choose death or prison. And the continuation right now under this system where we as patients do not have reasonable access to medicine is a real ongoing issue. We can't grow it, we can't sell it, we can't procure it, and we need to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Philip Smith from Sonoma County. I smoke pot. I hold down a responsible job. I'm otherwise a law-abiding citizen of the state of California. All I want from the state of California is to be left alone. So I support this bill, and I'd be happy to pay taxes.
Thank you, sir. All right. I want to thank everyone for their attendance and participation today. This has been very beneficial. And we look forward to the hearings in January. Thank you, Mr. Hagman, and to the other members who attended.